Welcome to Life Sirens, Behind and on the Scene, a podcast by first responders. We're your hosts, Sophie,
Jaime, and Aubrey.
Unpredictable and still one of the most meaningful.
The content provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policies or positions of any medical institutions, emergency medical services, or healthcare organizations. Patient privacy is a top priority, and all discussions involving real-world emergency situations are de-identified and altered to ensure confidentiality. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional or your local EMS protocols before making any decisions regarding patient care or medical practices. Listener discretion is advised, as some topics may include discussions of real-world emergency situations.
Welcome back to Life Sirens. This is the podcast where we talk about the calls that shape us, the culture that defines us, and the profession that demands more from us than most people will ever fully understand. Today we're diving into something that most of us interact with every single shift, but almost never talk or think about too deeply. Uniforms. And we've talked about this on social media, and it gets very fiery. So I'm pretty excited about this episode. So at first glance, uniforms seem simple. They are clothing, they are a dress code, they are issued by your agency and expected to be worn on shift. But when you start to unpack the idea of uniforms, you quickly realize they carry far more meaning than we usually acknowledge. When you put on your uniform before shift, what are you actually putting on? Is it just fabric, or are you putting on authority, expectation, responsibility, identity? Because in emergency services, uniforms have never been just about appearance. They communicate something to the public before we ever say a word. They communicate something to our coworkers before we ever demonstrate our clinical skills. And perhaps most importantly, they communicate something to our own minds about the role we are about to step into. Uniforms carry tradition, they carry hierarchy, they carry pride, and sometimes, if we're honest, they also carry ego. So today, we want to ask a deeper question. Are the uniforms we wear strengthening the identity of our profession? Or are they sometimes masking the fact that EMS is still trying to define exactly who we are?
So in our first segment, we're going to talk about the psychology of wearing uniform. So one of the reasons that uniforms matter so much is because they influence more than appearance. They influence psychology. There's a concept in psychology called enclothed cognition, which describes how clothing can affect the way people think, behave, and perform. In a landmark study published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, researchers found that participants wearing clothing associated with professionalism and expertise performed significantly better on attention-related tasks than participants wearing everyday clothing. The clothing itself did not change their intelligence, but the meaning attached to the clothing changed how seriously they approached the task.
I think that's so true, right? You put on like a suit and tie, or a nice business attire outfit, and you just feel like I can do this.
Did your teachers or professors in college or high school ever tell you before a test, get up in the morning, make a nice breakfast, get dressed dress up, and if you do, you perform significantly better on whatever exam you're going to take?
Well, and I can't help but think of how in medic school before we...
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, when we were going to take our national registry, we were required to wear our school uniform for this exact reason. And I'm not trying to brag, but we had 100% pass rate, so maybe
all of
there's
us
something
did.
to it.
Right? All of us in this room passed the first time. We're probably all wearing our uniform.
Yep.
So this concept that we're talking about becomes really interesting when you think about EMS. When you put on a uniform associated with responsibility and expertise, your brain begins to shift into that role. Think about your pre-shift routine. You lace up your boots, you clip on your radio, you check your pockets, you make sure your shears and gloves are exactly where they should be. These actions are not just practical preparation, they are psychological preparation. You are transitioning from everyday life into a role that carries serious responsibility.
Exactly. And that transition, it does really matter, especially in EMS, because our work environment is so unpredictable and high stakes. We have to make rapid decisions under pressure, often in some pretty emotionally intense situations. So anything that helps us mentally prepare to perform at a high level, it's valuable. The uniform does not just signal professionalism to the public, it signals readiness to the provider wearing it.
Have you ever gotten a call just like out the gate when you haven't put your boots on yet and your radio's not on and
yes.
like maybe you're untucked still, you got to tuck everything in,
You're just
and
like
all of a sudden
all over the place.
you're like, oh, there's no way I could possibly run this call.
Yeah.
Like it does, your brain is kind of in like a frenzy.
Absolutely. So we all remember our first uniform. I think most of us do. I certainly do. We've talked about it on the show and we've posted it, and I will happily post that again.
Those pants.
Yeah, they were rough, right? I definitely remember it. The pants, they did not fit. The boots, they were super stiff, and I probably checked my pockets 15 times before my first shift because I was afraid I was going to forget something important, and I definitely had way too many things in my pockets.
Always.
Right?
Yeah.
You had everything. Like, you have all the gizmos and gadgets before you really know, right? Like,
There is a very funny scene in the pit
yes.
where the charge nurse, there's a new nursing student comes in that has like a fanny pack and all this crazy stuff, and the charge nurse just starts taking it all off of her and is like,
It's so
we'll
funny.
store this back here. You need
Yeah.
none of this.
And she's like, oh.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have your groove yet. But when I put that uniform on, I felt like it was like a rite of passage, right? You get your first uniform. I remember when I got my first flight suit, same thing. You're just like, oh, I have my uniform, my suit. And for the first time, it did not feel like I was just pretending or like I was a student. Like, I really did feel like a provider now. You feel responsible, and it helps with confidence. I wasn't experienced yet, but it does feel like some responsibility. It's kind of like getting your first stethoscope. And I think that feeling is important, It's like a core memory kind of thing. Because the uniform, it should never give you ego, but it should give you awareness and responsibility that what you're carrying is pretty significant.
And for a lot of new providers, that moment can actually trigger something psychologists call imposter syndrome. I know that we've all heard of that, and I know that we've probably all experienced that. When you look in the mirror wearing the uniform and think, someone is trusting me to do this. Interestingly, research shows that imposter feelings are actually common among high-performing professionals. The people who take responsibility seriously are often the ones most aware of how complex the job really is. And that awareness creates humility, preparation, and caution. These are exactly the traits we want in clinicians caring for vulnerable patients.
Right, and I think when you have like a top-notch uniform on, you put it on, especially when you first start, or like on your first day, or before you're even in the field, and you're just like, am I worthy of wearing this?
Right, and the feeling when you went from that AEMT on your shirt to paramedic.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're like, ooh, I feel like this is, I don't know that I want to be wearing all this responsibility.
Yeah, it almost makes you a little sick to your stomach. Right?
It does, but like, have you noticed that I love the concept of imposter syndrome, because the people that feel it are always, like this says, like some of the highest level providers.
Yeah.
And so have you ever met those students or those like brand new EMTs that are like, I'm going to paramedic school this year out the gate, like they're going straight through?
You're like, girl, no.
And I'm like, are you sure? Like, experience is really valuable, and you want to be the best EMT to be able to be the best medic. And they're like, no, I'm good, I'm ready. And you're like, I don't know that's, I like the confidence. However, I feel like it may be a bit misplaced.
Right.
But then you meet that EMT that's been on the truck for 2 or 3 years, and you're like, hey, when are you going to medic school? And they're like, I don't think I'm ready. Like, I just don't feel like I am.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, you are.
Because the more you know, right? And the more unsettling that jump makes.
Yes.
Makes you feel.
But that imposter syndrome, like, in my brain, it always clicks a little switch. Like, oh, you take this job seriously.
Yeah.
Because you're not quite sure
about being careful about that decision.
Yeah.
Another reason that uniforms matter is perception. Before patients hear your voice, before they know your clinical skill level, before they ever even know your name, they see your uniform. And research in healthcare consistently shows that clinician attire influences patient perceptions of professionalism, competency, and trust. So several studies examining physician attire found that patients reported higher levels of trust and confidence when clinicians wore structured professional clothing compared to casual attire. This does not mean that clothing determines competency, but it does influence how quickly trust is established. So like you walk in a house and you're in a t-shirt and it's untucked and
it's wet because it's been 900 degrees outside.
Right. And the neck on your t-shirt is like super stretched out.
The letters
and-
on the back are like fading away.
Right. And your boots are doing something crazy. Like my
Yes.
pants always get tucked in my boots, and Aubrey will be like, Jaime,
Too.
fix yourself.
Yes.
But like you walk into a house like that, my trust level for you if I'm a patient just went down
Yes.
because I can't trust that you can even get yourself dressed.
And the argument is always that like, oh, if they need me, then they don't care what I look like.
That's not true.
Also,
That's not the reality that we
that is
live
not
in.
the reality. And if we're
Yeah.
trying to become a professional
Mm-hmm.
like service and kind of transition, like right now we are literally under the Department of Transportation. They don't see
Right.
us as
Like
like
what?
clinicians,
Yeah.
right? Like we got to do
And
better.
the idea of like if they really need me, they don't care what I look like. Yeah, what you look like may not make them look at you and be like, get out of my house. But it may give them more anxiety.
Yeah.
It may make them a lot more worried. It may make family members drive to the hospital like a crackhead because
Yeah.
they're concerned with what you're doing to your loved one
Absolutely.
in the back of the ambulance. Like, you're right. It may not make them refuse your care, but it doesn't mean that they're going to trust you.
Absolutely.
And that makes your job more difficult in the long run. And that makes their experience way shittier.
And don't even tell me as a provider you haven't looked at another agency and been like, that's your uniform.
Right.
That's what your ambulance looks like. Because you
Right.
have. I don't
Or
care who you are.
In the reverse, you've looked at another agency that you know.
You're like, dang. Yeah.
Yes. And like, I've had this experience with agencies where like I know their clinical capability.
Yeah.
I know the care they provide to their patients, and I know how much they don't care about their patients, and none of it's great. But they have really good uniforms.
Yeah.
And so like when they
Mhm.
show up, they have good equipment, they have good uniforms, they look good.
Yes.
And that's like half the battle to public perception, not to being an actual good clinician, but to
Yeah.
public perception, it's half the battle.
Well, and perception is all about gaining trust, right? Like, perception, unfortunately, especially the public's eyes, is reality. They can only make judgments on what they can see from the outside, and trust, obviously, is so important. And not only like with funding and things, but just in emergency medicine, right? When someone calls 911, they're often experiencing one of the worst moments of their life, or they think they are, all right? They are worried. They feel like they cannot handle the problem that they have right now, so they're calling you. They're scared, vulnerable, overwhelmed. When we walk through the door, the uniform is your symbol, right? It's your identifying, like, mark. It tells them someone capable has arrived. But that's symbolism. It does, like we said, come with responsibility, because while the uniform may create initial trust, like Jaime said, only your actions will really earn that. And we really want to hit that home. We're not saying you need to, like, level up your uniforms, because it just means you're a better clinician, right? It's a very multi-factorial equation, right? Like, you need the competence, you need the appearance, you need the scene presence. There's so many things.
When you start looking at EMS systems around the world, something interesting appears. The way paramedics dress varies significantly depending on how the profession developed in the country. In the United States, EMS uniforms often resemble public safety uniforms. Dark navy or black, cargo pants, boots, duty belts. Patches that resemble law enforcement insignia, but internationally, EMS often looks very different. In the United Kingdom, paramedics commonly wear green operational uniforms combined with high-vis jackets designed to make medical responders immediately recognizable in chaotic environments. Ireland's National Ambulance Services uses green uniform with white clinical shirts and shoulder slides indicating the training level. In Canada and Australia, paramedics often wear navy clinical uniforms paired with bright high-vis outerwear designed to improve safety and recognizability.
And I think that's the thing, is like we hear all the time, right? Like, the concern is that EMS is going to look like law enforcement, which absolutely should not be the case. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
But that means we have to do something about it. We can't just be like, oh, we should wear t-shirts so we don't look like law enforcement. That's
Yeah.
not
That's
not
not
what
the
we're
answer.
saying, right?
So
So
it's not become less professional so that you look less like law enforcement.
Right.
Not the answer. My brain goes straight to bulletproof vests and how you can differentiate yourself, because a lot of systems have started wearing bulletproof vests.
yeah.
But like fire, especially the fire around our agency, their vests are either red or they're like a khaki color
Yeah.
that say fire and high vis. And so they differentiate themselves from PD based off of like the color of their vest. And I think that EMS initially, in order to be taken seriously as a profession, we mirrored the uniforms of professions that were taken seriously.
Well, and often, and if you look at like how Freedom House started and everything, before that, the reason why Freedom House really became a thing up there was because cops were putting people in their cars, and that actually became a thing. Is like your job was, then they hired cops to do it, right? To go grab people and put them in their vehicles, sometimes a van, take them to the hospital. So it kind of did start out of, you know, law enforcement in some kind of way. But, like, it also kind of started in hearses, and we don't dress like funeral directors, do we?
Right, we don't wear, honestly, if we wore a three-piece suit, man, that is not a lot of movement, but you would look fly as
It would be wild.
You would look very
It would be wild.
good.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's such a big difference between us and other countries, right? So when you look at those uniforms globally, you start to see that many EMS systems, they intentionally design their uniforms to emphasize medical identity. And I know we're still working on our identity here, right? But it's about visibility, clinical recognition, accountability. It's not tactical. And there are environments where we may need to dress tactically, but make sure that we are color-coded accordingly, right? Like, just like there's several countries that we listed before, Ireland and the UK, they use green, right? And like many law enforcement agencies here might use black or navy blue. That means we could use another, like if you want to keep it with the blue, you could use royal blue, or like there's options to make you identifiable. We just really got to brand ourselves better, truly.
Yeah, like even something small, like our pants are a different color. They're gray.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that it's super interesting because if you look at agencies that are centered in South America, regardless of country, their uniforms are wild. Like the colors, like going to EMS world, you'll see a lot of agencies from different parts of the world. But their colors are always like crazy intricate and loud. They're just like so bright.
Yes.
And
they're
there's
like, we are EMS.
everywhere.
Don't shoot us.
Yeah, it's like a whole graphic tee. Like it is nuts to see what all of their uniforms look like. And when they walk in a room, everybody in there looks at them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very high vis. Like absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just every time that I see them, I'm like, you are just like a very identifiable ninja.
Yes, and you turn and look like that. I think to some degree is how it should be. And like for like you guys wearing gray pants, the community can identify you in most scenarios if they can see your full body, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's important. Like I'm not saying we have to streamline like the UK because they have the national health system, but like we need to be markedly different and still professional.
For sure. And I think it would be super useful for civilians to be able to be like, that's medical.
Yes.
You
or
know?
to be able to even walk up to you and be like, I know who you are.
Yes, because even how many times do you walk up to a patient on like a MBA and they immediately start handing you license and insurance?
Yeah. Oh, I'm every day.
Yeah.
Every
they're
day.
like, what do I do about my car? Is the tow truck
oh,
coming? And I'm like, hey, honey, I'm just here to check on you, make sure you're okay.
Exactly.
And they're like, then they'll look at your shirt and be like, oh.
Yeah.
But initially,
they don't know.
They don't know. But if I was wearing something that, you know, probably hurt my eyeballs, then everyone would be able to tell.
They would know.
Yeah. And so, in the vein of being able to recognize that medical help has arrived, that difference reflects history. And so, like we've talked about, in so many countries, they developed primarily within healthcare systems. And so it wasn't out of cops throwing people in cars. And it wasn't a part of the Department of Transportation. Right?
Yeah.
They developed in healthcare systems. And so in the U.S., EMS largely developed within fire departments and rescue services. Because if you needed help, that's who would go. Right? And so our uniforms reflect that history a lot of the times of fire, because that is who initially started forming ambulance services, mostly because they were already going.
Yeah.
And I think that changes based on what part of the United States you're in. Like in our region, it's actually much more common to be an ambulance service that is a standalone, that is not affiliated with the fire department, than it is in some other regions. In other regions, it's unheard of to be, if you're not a private company.
Yeah. If you just go to the state next door, most of the time, it's like private or hospital based. There are some county services or municipalities, but most of the time it's not, and that really tripped me out.
Yeah.
And I think this all gets chalked up to, right? Like, we just don't know our identity yet. And I think that's largely our problem in EMS. Like, when we talk about we're not taken seriously, we don't have the funding. We have not branded ourselves, guys. We have not come together and said, this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is how we're going to do it. We just kind of, like, all do it adjacent to each other, and there's no powerhouse in EMS. Like, nurses, obviously this is an agency or a profession, I mean, that stemmed out of healthcare again, but like generally you can go to that's why they have a interstate license, right? Like we cannot do that because it is so unique, and I've learned this very quickly over the last several years that like literally anywhere you go and you just like cross the state line and it is a whole new world.
Yeah.
And maybe we should work on that, right? We need to be a little more cohesive. People need to know, what we do, who we are. Like, how many healthcare providers have you come into contact with who are like, I don't know the difference between EMT and AMT and a paramedic?
Oh,
they
yeah.
don't.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they have very close ties or if have worked in this field, they do not know.
Exactly. I know that we said where we came from, right? We kind of came from this makeshift system where we're like, we just need to rescue people. We need to get them to a hospital. We were not initially formed in a healthcare manner. Like, that wasn't the goal. And we talked about how sometimes we do look a lot like police officers, and that is the reoccurring theme. It's like, well, this is what we're worried about, changing our uniform. If we get collar, I'm like, okay, well, you need collars. I'll die on that hill. Anyway, you're not gonna always look like a cop if you make sure you don't look like a cop. That's the biggest scramble, right? How do we stop looking like cops? Well, let me just tell you, you stop looking like cops. You have the ability as an organization to change in most scenarios at any time, right? There's certain situations where like you may need state approval, but I guarantee you if you change the color of your uniform shirt or your pants, they're just gonna be like, okay. Like,
yeah,
it's probably not that crazy. But the thing we're seeing even more, like, this is the complaint our providers have, right? They don't want to look like cops, and I don't want to look like a cop either.
Yeah.
But in the United States, EMS uniforms have increasingly adopted this, like, tactical aesthetic, right? The dark colors, the cargo pants, the heavy boots, like, sometimes vests, right? We talked about that. And then sometimes I've seen providers with, like, duty belts with things on them. And that's very identifiable, like, law enforcement aesthetic.
Yeah.
And part of this shift came from, the practicality of, and like the safety, like in some areas where we need, we sometimes have to wear the vest.
I would say some of the other countries that we've discussed about have extreme and very functional gun control.
Right.
And so like something like a tactical vest is not super necessary for them.
Right.
Really bright colors is not very dangerous because you can't be a 300-yard target. But in the country that we live in, being wildly identifiable from other providers could potentially be a downfall.
Yeah. I think so in some scenarios, but I think on a day-to-day basis,
it would be very minimal.
Well, and we've all experienced this. There are communities we serve in that often, don't have great relationships with law enforcement, but they don't want to hurt us. They like us, right? They love EMS. Yeah. They interact with us quite often, and it's usually pretty great. And even if there is a situation where law enforcement is on scene, they're like, get them out of here. We want to talk to you. So, like, generally, and this is anecdotal, of course, but, like, my experience is that we can be a little more identifiable.
Yeah, I think the pros far outweigh the cons.
100%.
Yeah.
So, safety, yes, but there's also this cultural aspect. EMS evolved alongside fire and law enforcement, and those professions have strong visual identities, right? Again, we don't know who the heck we are. We got to brand ourselves, guys. So, over time, EMS just kind of have adopted the things nearby. And we are first responders, right? We are not cops, though. We are, in most scenarios, not firefighters. And I say this too. People are like, we should just wear scrubs. We are not nurses. We are not doctors. We operate in a pre-hospital environment that is unquestionably chaotic. And there's mystery liquids and blood. And just like we're crawling into cars. We do need to keep our bodies safe. I don't know. We can be a little more creative in how we brand ourselves. And a t-shirt, I'm just going to say this. Like, a t-shirt is not going to protect you as much as a polo will. I'm not saying you have to choose the polo. But there's a reason why that is a safer choice. It's different material. It does protect your neck in some way. Like a Class B even. Like, often you'll see fire departments wearing these shirts, right? It's a thicker material. It's not going to rip. It's not going to pull. Like, it's much easier to harm someone with their own uniform. It's a freaking t-shirt, okay? Like, I'm just going to be so
Yeah.
real with y'all.
And my t-shirt argument is that it just looks unprofessional. I think if you operate somewhere that is just hotter than literal hell,
Yeah.
and in the height of summer, if you go to t-shirts, we have a certain temperature that we're allowed to go to t-shirts, and I think that that's perfectly
Yeah, yeah.
acceptable. But it was for years we just had the same cotton, supposed to be worn underneath your polo
Mhm.
t-shirts, and they looked terrible.
And I've worked at agencies where we wore t-shirts.
Yeah.
I feel so exposed.
They look
I feel
terrible.
like I'm half dressed.
Yes.
I'm like,
But
where are my
we-
clothes?
Don't look at my neck.
Yeah.
more recently have transitioned to t-shirts that look a lot more professional.
You
They are
can
just a
get
cleaner
nice ones.
fabric that doesn't fade.
Embroidered name, right? It's not
Yes.
printed, so it's not going to fade.
Yes, it looks a lot better, and I think that now my brain is less grumpy about t-shirts just because the actual aesthetic of it is
Yes.
improved. And so if you are at an agency that wears t-shirts and that's everyone's going to die on that hill, that's fine. Make them look nicer.
And you have to be willing to give your providers multiple, and you have to replace them frequently. It can't just
Yeah.
happen like you get a shirt once a year.
Yeah, no, because
It's
they
not-
look terrible.
it's not fair.
Not going to work. The challenge is that when uniforms become too tactical, the message becomes confusing. Patients may not immediately recognize who the medical provider is, and in some communities, a tactical appearance may even create hesitation or fear,
Exactly.
as we have already discussed. This does not mean that tactical clothing is inherently wrong, but it does raise an important question. What message do we want our uniforms to send?
And that again, we have to form an identity for ourselves.
Mhm.
Who the heck are we? What's our
Yeah.
mission?
If you got to wear vests, even your vest having a gigantic EMS with a big red cross on it,
Yeah.
that's why.
And even if you want a navy vest, have EMS be in red
Yeah,
or
something
something
super bright or
Yeah.
high vis,
Yeah,
yellow or something.
reflective.
Yeah. So another interesting aspect about uniforms involves authority symbols.
Absolutely.
So badges, your rank insignia, special patches, different colored shirts, the infamous white shirt. And humans are extremely sensitive to these signals. And classic psychology research has shown that people are more likely to follow instructions from individuals who appear to hold authority. And we have all experienced this when you have told your patient up, down, left, and right in 700 different ways.
How they're going to die if they don't go to the
Yes,
hospital.
that they need to go to the hospital or else they are going to die in their home. And finally, you call your supervisor and you're like, please come talk some sense into them. They're on scene for 30 seconds in their white shirt and they're like, hey, you really need to go or you're going to die. And the patient's like, okay. And you're like,
get
I
out of here.
swear I tried so
I
hard.
worked so hard.
But that white shirt, and there's a fantastic study that was done with civilians. And essentially, it's two people sitting in a room. They meet each other. One of the people goes behind a wall and is supposed to be attached to electrical conducting wires. The other person stays behind the other wall and has a button. And they're able to turn up the voltage. There's somebody in a lab coat that walks in and tells them, shock them. And they do. And the person's like, you hear a whimper. Whatever. Well, as this experiment goes on, the person in the lab coat continues to tell the person, mind you, the person in the lab coat never gave any credentialing, never gave any this is why I'm allowed to do this, nothing. And the person in the lab coat continues to tell the person that's shocking to go higher and higher and higher in voltage. And the other person's screams get louder and louder and louder and louder.
By the way, they're not actually getting shocked.
They are not. They're an actor.
Yes.
But basically at the end of it, the time to where people felt very uncomfortable and were convinced that they were going to kill this person
Yeah.
to the time that they actually refused to shock them again
Was insane.
was insane. And some people went all the way to a lethal shock dose because the person in the lab coat told them to. If you repeat that experiment with somebody just in civilian clothing, people quit very, very easily and very soon.
Yeah.
But that idea of dressing like you have authority, there is a fallacy of authority that lives there. And it's really important, especially in our job.
Because we do have authority, right? We need that. We need to command scenes. We need to be able to guide other co-responders and things like that. It is important to look the part that you are performing. In emergency scenes, clear role identification, it is very helpful. Even knowing the difference between, at your agency, you may have supervisors who wear a different color shirt, a white shirt or something. Like, it's the supervisor, even if you're working over on a shift or you're a part-timer and you've never seen that person before.
Yeah, even like 100 yards down the interstate, I can pick out
Yeah.
that white shirt.
I'm
like,
like,
I
oh,
know they're
there's
there.
there's our supervisor. Because you need to know quickly, right? Who is the paramedic? Who is the supervisor? And who is leading the incident? But authority symbols can also create problems in leadership, especially if they rely on rank instead of competence, which happens everywhere. It does happen everywhere, right? And just something to keep in mind, right? But the strongest teams are not the ones where people follow orders just because of a patch, right? That's not really an interagency thing, right? I should say, like, you should be doing things based on common sense, clinical practice, best practice, protocols, things like that, safety, not just because someone is, quote unquote, in charge of you. They are the teams where leadership is really earned through the knowledge, the mentorship, the relationship there. But it's good for when you don't know the people who are on your scene, when there are multiple agencies on scene. It is very important to be able to easily identify these members of the team.
We talk about that a lot with the concept of fire. In our region, we have fire departments that are strictly EMRs. We have BLS fire departments that have some AEMTs, and then we have ALS fire departments that have all of it.
Yeah.
But the problem that we'll run into is that the rank at the fire department is based on fire experience, right? So their captain is the most knowledgeable and the best. They're the most trusted on that engine or on that rescue because of their fire knowledge, right? And so they have climbed the rank based off of that. The problem then lies on all the medical calls that you go into. There is no hierarchy and ranking system in that for medical calls. And so if they're still referring to their captain, that may actually be the lowest medical licensure on that scene, that becomes a problem. And especially if they're referring to their captain over the paramedic that's on scene.
Absolutely.
And it essentially is a structure that hasn't really, and some agencies and some departments may have that built in. And so that has become a bit of a point of contingency because sometimes they still look to cap to do whatever the captain says, except for the captain is 4 licensures below the medical provider that's on scene. And so that starts to become a pretty convoluted issue. And I think that is a great example of when, like, just following a patch doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
And it becomes problematic when you find yourself in a different role.
And I definitely would encourage, if you do have, like, if you work on a fire department, and some do, a lot of them do, but if your agency that you work with, or you work for a fire department where there are multiple personnel on scene with different structural ranks, but they have different license levels, I think it's important to just put it on your uniform, right? You're a firefighter, paramedic. You're a firefighter, EMT. Like, it's nice too for us as, paramedics to be like, hey, Joe, I see on your shirt that your name is Joe, that you're a firefighter, and that you are a paramedic. So I can hopefully rely on you to do a skill that is in your scope.
There's another interesting concept in education called the hidden curriculum. It refers to the lessons people learn indirectly through culture rather than formal teaching, and uniforms play a role in that. New providers often look at what senior providers wear and copy it. If the culture values professionalism, preparation, and pride in appearance, new providers adopt those behaviors. If the culture is sloppy or careless, that gets passed down too.
Exactly. And uniforms, they quietly communicate expectations. I mean, just think about it in school. We had to wear that uniform. We had to wear it like we were supposed to, or else we were going to get points taken off or potentially sent home, right? They tell new providers what professionalism looks like in your organization, in your, college. That does set a standard. It sets the tone, right? Leadership should absolutely recognize that. And I'm not saying changing a uniform is going to fix everything, but it is a start. And what we look like and how we take pride in what we look like does matter. Culture is often taught visually before it's ever taught verbally, right? We know the vibe, right? We can tell very quickly. We talked about this earlier in the episode. You can tell what you're bringing to the table or what your expectation is of what someone's bringing to the table based on their outward appearance when it comes to professionalism.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Chris Saballero, host of the Inside EMS podcast. EMS is demanding, unpredictable, and still one of the most meaningful careers out there. If you care about this work and where the profession is headed, your perspective matters. The EMS Trend Survey gives providers a platform to share honest takes on the job, its challenges, and what it needs to change. Take a few minutes and help shape the future of EMS. Visit ems1.com/survey to share your experience.
Now we have to talk about flight suits. Because nothing changes how people perceive you faster than walking into a room wearing one. People automatically assume mastery.
And of course, like flight programs, just like hopefully any ground program, is absolutely going to require a high clinical standard, but the suit itself is not what makes someone exceptional. If anything, it should create humility, because expectations are now higher, right? You may be coming in because ground crew has exhausted all their options, and now you have to, bring things to the next level. Patients and providers assume you're going to bring, the critical care, the professionalism, you're top tier, hopefully, right? That's like the level up in EMS in a lot of scenarios, just like supervisor or like FTO. Like once you level up to something, you expect that person to provide the extra leadership, the extra clinical experience. So this really just exhibits the power of uniforms and trust and perception, because I've seen it on people's faces, and I've been the person who says, thank God you're here, right? And you can clock that flight suit immediately and just know, like, okay, we're going to be okay. And that's because of the outward trust and perception that has been associated with it.
Yeah, and that is so strong that even when, because we all know providers that have gone to flight that were like, oh.
Yeah.
Like, what?
That's not going to last long.
Yeah, that can't go well. But my brain still is like, thank God you're here every time I see a flight suit.
Yes.
Like, even knowing that, and even knowing providers that have gone to flight, that I'm like, oh, that is not a good move. Like, you're a dangerous human.
Yep.
I still feel that way.
Yeah.
About when a flight suit gets in my truck. I still assume that they are the highest level of possible licensure.
You at least have extra things, and you can go faster than me.
But it's a cool thing to kind of recognize that even when you know that that's not necessarily true, your brain still does it.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, somebody's always getting in trouble for wearing the wrong uniform, and like they become like, oh, they're like, even if that's the only thing that they're doing, like quote unquote wrong or like against policy, like you're like, they're trouble, they're always getting in trouble.
Right. Or when someone's stinky,
yeah,
do you know anything about them as a provider? No, I know that they smell bad.
Yeah,
and that is all I know about them. Because the fact that you
hygiene is part of your uniform.
The fact you can't shower means that I'm no longer concerned with anything else, because we can't do step one.
Yeah. It's distracting. It is distracting. And like Jaime said, like attention to detail is a skill set that is required, and it saves lives. Medication doses, airway positioning, even scene safety. How you do the small things, it's just going to reflect how you approach the big things. And I think not only as providers should we be taking pride in our uniforms and making sure that we look presentable and together, but also like as agencies and companies, like make sure your crews are equipped with the right uniforms to be able to represent your organization well and to be able to take pride in themselves. But anything worth doing is probably going to be hard at some point during the process. There's going to be some effort you're going to have to put into it. And if you are a leadership, know that like it's not about like leveling up or like, oh, I've been here long enough, I deserve to be a supervisor or whatever it is. It is about you're stepping into a servant role. Your job is you're not in charge of anyone. You are charged with taking care of your team. And part of that is having safe, presentable, providers who are proud of what they look like, and their community is proud of what they look like. So if you're going to level up in that kind of responsibility, right? Like that matters.
I also think this is something that we didn't like necessarily address, but I feel like women deal with this a lot.
Absolutely.
When wanting to look good in your uniform. And a lot of times people are like, it's not a beauty contest. Like why do you want to look good in your uniform? because me feeling like I present well and like I
Yeah.
look good in my uniform makes me feel more competent. It makes
Yeah.
me feel more confident that I can do my job.
100%.
And I think that the perfect example of this is that when I first started at the agency that we work for, we had these god awful pants.
They were crazy, guys.
They were, like,
Again, I'm gonna
made-
post a picture.
I hate them. They
They're
were made
wild.
out of tarps, and it did not matter if you had like a booty for days.
No.
It gave you paper butt.
It was gone.
It makes it look
Yes.
like you're a child.
And it had to go, the inseam was so long on every single possible pair of pants that it had to go up past your belly button.
It will touch your sports bra.
Yes. And every female that works at our service looked terrible.
It just looks
And honestly, most of
dumb.
the men looked terrible too.
Yeah.
Everybody looked
Yeah.
pretty terrible.
They weren't great.
And we just changed what pants we were allowed to wear. And now everybody looks 20 times better.
And
100
everybody,
times better.
you can tell. You can tell, especially
Mhm.
when we first made the change and people didn't have to buy them themselves because that's what we were having to do. People
Mhm.
were so excited.
Mhm.
People were so excited to
Yes.
get new uniforms, and we implemented, a uniform stipend. Like, you can do that. Like,
yes. The confidence
way.
level went up. The performance level went up. And that is such a small way to be able to encourage employees. Like, we want you to feel good and to be safe and to look good and to be confident in the way you present yourself.
absolutely.
And there's a lot of value there.
So all of that to say this. Tomorrow, when you put your uniform on, pause for just a second. Remember what it represents. Skill, trust, responsibility, and access to people on the worst day of their lives. Wear it with humility, earn it every shift, and never let the uniform become more impressive than the provider inside it. Because patients will not remember what you wore, they will remember how you treated them, and whether you showed up ready or not. And if you see your partner with their pants tucked into their boots, make sure you tell them that they look ridiculous.
They'll know.
yeah, don't look ridiculous.
This has been Life Sirens, produced by 3 nerds trying to bring you content that you might actually care about.